I'm gonna be honest, it does actually pain quite a lot to see a lot of vehicles in War Tycoon be put to absolutely no use, and I do hate to make these videos. I don't really want to complain. However, complaining is probably the best way that we can go ahead and make a change as community. In today's video, guys, I'll be going through at least 10 vehicles or something like this that actually do deserve to be having a big change, which in real life they're in such a big spotlight, but in War Tycoon, not really so. So anyway, let's just jump right into it. I really do hope the developers will actually take notes on this, because the community does want to see this. So anyway, moving to the helicopters, I will be going through the first vehicle which the community would love to actually be seeing in the spotlight, and this is the AH-64 Apache. You know, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, whenever the Apache has came out into the game, it did have quite impressive overload, because it does have 38 rockets and 4 lock-on missiles, which is actually quite a lot on paper. However, in reality, these rockets do absolutely no area damage, the missiles have terrible range, the missiles are also just not good in general because of damage too. And everything is that the main cannon of this gun is so insanely slow, but if you compare it to real life, a main cannon in the AH-64, oh man, that thing definitely does shred. Now, if we do go ahead and take into consideration this vehicle in War Tycoon, not so much. It does have horrible stats, 450 health, 170 speed, but if we do take a look at the operation it does take to go ahead and get it, the operation isn't actually so hard, and this does seem like a vehicle that a normal starter player would want to go ahead and get themselves. But if the player does end up actually getting this vehicle, they will most of the time end up extremely disappointed. Another reason why is because you could just get a vehicle which with much easier of an operation, like the A129 Mangusto, which just has the most no-skill rockets and a very powerful explosive gun, and you're just pretty much covered at an easier operation, where with the AH-64 as a starter player, grinding these 25 kills, it's really gonna be incredibly difficult. So yeah, I do really hope that this vehicle will be getting some kind of change. In my personal opinion, it should just be removed from the game for now and just get a complete remodel, redesign, and actually be a much better vehicle overall. It's what the community wants, Gizmotech. Now, moving into the second vehicle, talking about the Eurocopter, this is probably, in my opinion, the second worst helicopter in the game in terms of actually fighting other opponents, and the reason why the Eurocopter is so bad these days is because its missiles do pretty much no damage. Once again, a vehicle that does tickle quite a lot, and other than this, its main gun is also not really this good. The Eurocopter, back in the day, I think 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, it used to be known as the Mi-24 counter, back when the Mi-24 had its former glory. I understand, Gizmotech, this vehicle has not been touched for quite a long time, and that is very understandable that why this vehicle is balanced this way. However, I believe whenever new vehicles get added, I think the older vehicles should also receive some buffs, and the Eurocopter is once again another example of that. Because I would like to add the fact that the reason why these two vehicles are so bad isn't because Gizmotech is trying to make them worse or the developers have a thing against them. That's not the reason. It's because the vehicle just has old balancing and it hasn't been touched in a while. Now, talking about the old balancing, we have ourselves a perfect exemplar of the old balancing in War Tycoon, the F4 Phantom. The reason why the F4 wasn't this good on release is because they could not afford to make this vehicle better in any way, shape or form, because they needed to give stuff like the F14, the F35 a little bit more of a spotlight. But now if we take a look at the weaponry of this vehicle, seriously, it's actually not this good. It doesn't have really the best turning speed, it only has 2 missiles, and it does have a unique feature of having the napalm bombs. So I'm not saying this vehicle should be buffed very much in terms of power. I think this vehicle should just be given a little bit more of weaponry and give it a unique use, such as giving it maybe some more napalm bombs. This vehicle is really good for this reason in some many scenarios. However, again, 2 napalm bombs will probably not be enough, but if you could give it like 4 bombs or something like this would just make this vehicle a lot more useful, and it will give it its own little gimmick that the community would love to see. Because again, the vehicle shouldn't be much more powerful than the other, they should just be unique compared to each other. That's my personal take on it. Now, moving into another vehicle, and this will probably be the last plane on this list, but I will be picking the Eurofighter. This has been suggested by quite a lot, but if I'm going to be completely honest, the Eurofighter right now, it's a good plane, but that's not the problem with the Eurofighter. But the problem with it is that it's one of the best planes, if not the best plane in the whole entire world, in terms of just being able to fight enemies in air-to-air, and it's made for air superiority. That's the main goal that you have for this vehicle. However, again, it doesn't actually get that job done in War Tycoon. It gets unturned by a lot of other other jets in the game, which just doesn't make for it to be outturned by them. Another thing is with the Eurofighter is that in real life it is able to carry up to even 10 missiles, but in War Tycoon it only carries 6, it carries 4 air-to-airs and 2 ground. So I think it will be a good buff to just give this vehicle better air superiority in giving it better turning speed, but maybe even giving it 2 bonus missiles for air-to-air. Again, this vehicle is one of the best planes in the whole entire world in terms of fighting in the sky, but the Eurofighter just doesn't simply get that job done well enough. Now, moving into the M1 Abrams, and this is going to be a quite complicated one. Now, the M1 Abrams, this vehicle is actually quite interesting to go ahead and talk about because of the fact that in real life, this has to be one of the best tanks in the whole entire world, but in War Tycoon, not so much. The reason why I see this happening is probably because the current M1 Abrams, which we have in War Tycoon, is one of the worst designs that they have in real life, and it pretty much is, I think, the first or the second worst M1 Abrams that have created. So I think the best idea for this tank right now wouldn't really be buffing its stats by completely giving it a full-on rework, because it's something that the community has wanted for a long time, but the only thing Kismotech has done is just buff its health. So if they were to actually go ahead and just rework the M1 Abrams and add a different design to it, or just add another variant of it, that would be much better, and just give it some much more unique weaponry, because in general the people would love to see this vehicle be much stronger than it is. And once again, it has probably the most difficult operation out of any tank in the whole entire game. Yeah, stealing 40 vehicle crates, that is like absolutely insane of a challenge to go ahead and get done. Like, it takes so long to grind this vehicle, and when a new player sees, it's the M1 Abrams, they go ahead and get it, and then they do get disappointed after like a few days of grinding. That does really suck. But also, another thing with this vehicle is that this vehicle is a victim of old balancing in War Tycoon. It is quite of an old vehicle, it has been added in the Abrams X update, but the reason why the Abrams X has actually stayed as one of the best tanks in the game is because the Abrams X has evolved, and the M1 Abrams has not evolved at all, and once again it is a victim of not being touched in a very long time. Now, the next vehicle on this list is going to be the Adats. The Adats, I'm gonna be totally honest, if the developers even look at the statistics, this vehicle is barely spawned compared to any other tanks, and you might be wondering why this vehicle is not that good. Most of us pro players that do play this game for a long time just know that this vehicle is simply not as good as the Patriot and the Panzer S1. There is pretty much no use to going ahead and spawning this vehicle in, considering it does take parts to spawn. However, if logically a vehicle that does take parts to spawn should be much better than any other vehicle that doesn't, but in reality this vehicle, the Adats, is not really as good as it should be, and the reason why once again is because this vehicle is a victim of old balancing in War Tycoon, because it hasn't been touched in a long while by the developers. So I would love this vehicle to at least be taken 111 parts. I think that would be a very good buff to it, to actually give people some reason to go ahead and spawn it in. And another thing that I think would be good for the Adats is actually making these rockets somewhat good, because right now all they do is just tickle the enemy. I have had instances where this vehicle is not able to even kill an F-35 after shooting it with 8 missiles. It just doesn't feel like a good vehicle, and I think it does need a lot of changes. Like, even if you take a look at its health, it has 780 health, and this is pretty much the lowest health out of any tank in the whole entire game. And if War Tycoon, if you're going to be placing it as a tank, you gotta actually treat it as a tank. Now, finally moving into the ground vehicles, which have to be the most useless vehicles that we have ourselves in War Tycoon as of now. I've already talked about the Katyusha, I've already talked about the HIMARS. I really hope that War Tycoon is going to be improving the artillery system at some point. It really is a shame of what's happening to these vehicles right now. Almost nobody uses them, and they don't really have a clear use. The artilleries are made for long-range attacks. In War Tycoon, they're close-range attacks. Anyway, moving into another vehicle which has actually been forgotten about, and I'm gonna be totally honest, I have not seen this vehicle used in around a few months now, and that is absolutely insane. I know you guys remember when the JOTV has received a rework. However, it just in general, this vehicle by now, in modern standards and modern balancing, has absolutely no use, because of, first of all, its javelins have been nerfed, but another thing is, there just came in a vehicle that most of the time just beats it without any problem, and that vehicle is a Sturrier vehicle, which in fact is the Humvee. Fun fact, the Humvee's main gun is way better than the explosive machine gun and the normal machine gun of the freaking JOTV. Tell me how that makes any sense. The JOTV is a Game Pass, the Humvee is better than it. It makes absolutely no sense. Again, this vehicle has absolutely no use right now, so I think the only ways to go ahead and make this vehicle better is just to buff its statistics up to modern standards. Anyway, moving into another vehicle which we have in this list, is going to be a very simple one. I talk about this a lot, but I'm going to be mentioning this once again. Lazar APC, probably the most forgotten vehicle in this whole entire game. War Tycoon, the last time I have actually talked about this vehicle and asked you guys to go ahead and buff this, same with the community. All we have received is a health buff. I don't think health just going to cut it. I think the best way to make APCs useful in War Tycoon is to simply give them a much higher firepower according to the modern balancing that we have in the game. Every time there's a new vehicle, it is just way more powerful compared to vehicles like this, and they really do get overshadowed. It's not really possible to make this vehicle have its unique mechanic. It's just, I think the best thing to go ahead and do with it is just buff its statistics, make the rockets actually have way heavier area damage, and make its main cannon much stronger. Maybe to go ahead and add to this, you could go ahead and make the health a lot higher as well. Again, this vehicle just doesn't fit anymore, and there's no point of even using it as a starter player if you could head to something like the KF-51 Panther and just get an easier operation done and get yourself a better vehicle, which here you're working up to a way harder operation, but this vehicle just doesn't get the job done. Once again, another vehicle which we have ourselves on this list is going to be the Guardian. I'm gonna be honest, the Guardian is alright. However, as for a vehicle that does get searched up the most out of any vehicle in War Tycoon, even on YouTube, everyone's just looking for parts for it. Once again, once they do complete the operation and get this vehicle, it's not really a surprise, it doesn't really give anything special. So I think the good way to go ahead and make the Guardian better is going to be buffing its health and actually giving it a much more powerful of a cannon. Again, I don't want this vehicle to get a rework because it will take a long time to go ahead and implement something like this, and it's not important, so just buffing its statistics would just be the best way to go ahead and make it fit in the modern meta. Now, lastly, moving into the most requested rework and redesign in the whole entire game, this has to be the Boxer CRV. Sure, the Boxer has received a buff like a while ago, and I'm gonna be totally honest with you, the Boxer is okay at doing its job, but in reality, the problem with the Boxer is that there is nothing interesting about it and going for it, unlike any other Game Pass vehicles. The Abrams X has its drones, has its Javelin, has its overwhelming firepower, the Mi-28 has its overwhelming firepower, but then the Boxer is just left in the dust with no special gimmicks going for it, just has an explosive gun and a normal machine gun, and that's just literally about it. But what the people have actually wanted to see added to the Boxer CRV is to have some kind of wire-guided missiles. People have been asking to add at least 2 to this vehicle, which would actually be a pretty cool redesign, and actually add something like this to the Boxer. It would give it a lot more use, and it would pretty much be a worse VCAC Mephisto, but it would also have a lot of guns which are just used for backup. I would really love the War Tycoon to go ahead and actually redesign the Boxer and give it a lot more use, because again, the community has been asking for a long time, and just buffing statistics for this vehicle is simply not gonna cut it. But I am sure just adding 2 wire-guided missiles, it won't take that long. Anyway guys, that's everything I have for you in today's video. I hope that you did enjoy this video. I did actually take quite a lot of time to go ahead and get this list done with a lot of people in the community that do play this game a lot, so I would very much appreciate the like under this video. But yeah, Kisbo, if you're watching this, I very much appreciate it, and please make some changes to these vehicles. All they have to be is really just unique. They don't have to be an overwhelming firepower. Anyway, I'll see you guys next video. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks so much to my channel members.